Welcome to Ultimate Sleep Doctor. Tonight, we'll journey into the quiet wonder of our planet. Consider the incredible story of life on Earth, a delicate, vibrant dance of evolution unfolding over billions of years. From the smallest microbe to the towering redwood, every organism whispers of resilience and adaptation. It's a testament to the persistent power of change, a beautiful, intricate system still learning and growing. Let's acknowledge the deep connection we share with this living world, a shared heritage of patience and enduring beauty. If you find these explorations soothing, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Ultimate Sleep Doctor. Together, we can soothe more wandering minds, one peaceful night at a time. Just breathe, let your thoughts drift, and allow yourself to fully settle. Let's begin. The early Earth was a very different place than it is today. It wasn't a world of green forests and sparkling oceans, but a turbulent, volatile landscape. Volcanic eruptions spewed ash and gases into the atmosphere. Intense ultraviolet radiation from the sun, unfiltered by a protective ozone layer, bombarded the surface. Lightning flashed with incredible frequency. The air was thick with methane, ammonia, and water vapor, a far cry from the oxygen-rich environment we breathe now. This wasn't a gentle cradle for life. It was a place of constant change and energetic bombardment. And within this harsh environment, a remarkable chemical story was beginning to unfold, one that ultimately led to the very first forms of life. The prevailing scientific theory suggests that life on Earth didn't begin with complex DNA-based organisms. Instead, it started with something simpler, something incredibly versatile: RNA. RNA, or ribonucleic acid, is a molecule closely related to DNA, but with a key difference. DNA is the long-term storage molecule for genetic information, a sturdy record keeper, but RNA is much more active. It can both store genetic information and actually carry out the work of that information, like a tiny, mobile instruction manual. This dual functionality was crucial for the origins of life, offering a flexible and efficient system for early biological processes. Scientists believe that RNA likely formed spontaneously in these early conditions. The building blocks of RNA, ribonucleotides, could assemble themselves from the available chemicals. Researchers have even demonstrated this happening in the laboratory, under conditions mimicking those of early Earth. These experiments showed that, given the right circumstances, RNA molecules could self-assemble from simple ingredients. Now, RNA needed a way to replicate itself. This is where the remarkable catalytic properties of RNA come into play. Certain RNA molecules, called ribozymes, can act as enzymes, biological catalysts, speeding up chemical reactions. Imagine a tiny machine within the RNA molecule, constantly working to make copies of itself. This self-replication capability, combined with the ribozyme's catalytic action, created a positive feedback loop. More RNA molecules were created, and those molecules could, in turn, create even more. These early RNA molecules weren't sophisticated like the genes in our cells today. They were probably short, relatively simple sequences. However, this simplicity was precisely what made them effective in the chaotic conditions of early Earth. They didn't need a complex environment to function. They could thrive in the energy-rich conditions surrounding volcanic vents or within mineral-rich pools. These pools, often containing metal ions like iron and magnesium, are thought to have played a critical role, providing the necessary catalysts for RNA formation and replication. The most compelling evidence for RNA's role comes from the RNA world hypothesis. This hypothesis proposes that, for a significant period in early Earth's history, RNA, rather than DNA or proteins, was the primary form of genetic material and the driving force behind all biological activity. Proteins, which are complex molecules responsible for building and repairing structures, couldn't have formed until after RNA had established a basic system for information storage and transmission. It's thought that these early RNA molecules were involved in a wide array of processes. They might have been responsible for catalyzing the formation of more complex organic molecules, the building blocks of life. They could have facilitated the assembly of early cell membranes, perhaps by guiding the arrangement of fatty acids. Crucially, they were undoubtedly involved in the replication of genetic information, laying the groundwork for the evolution of more complex life forms. One fascinating area of research focuses on the possibility that RNA played a role in synthesizing proteins. Some ribozymes have been shown to catalyze the formation of peptide bonds, the links that join amino acids together to form proteins. While the precise mechanism is still being investigated, it suggests that RNA might have been the initial driver of protein synthesis, before the advent of DNA and the intricate protein machinery we see today. The transition from an RNA-based world to a DNA and protein-dominated world wasn't a sudden event. It was likely a gradual process, driven by mutations and selective pressures. Eventually, DNA, with its greater stability and accuracy, began to replace RNA as the primary information storage molecule. Proteins, with their greater versatility and efficiency, took over the roles of catalysis and structural support. However, RNA didn't disappear. It still exists in our cells today, playing vital roles in processes like protein synthesis. Ribosomes, the cellular machines that build proteins, are made of RNA and protein. Messenger RNA, mRNA, which carries genetic instructions from DNA to the ribosomes, is itself an RNA molecule. This demonstrates that RNA's fundamental role in life continues to this day. The study of RNA's origins is a challenging one, relying heavily on laboratory experiments and theoretical models. But the evidence is mounting, suggesting that RNA was indeed the first spark of life on Earth. It's a testament to the resilience of simple molecules and the remarkable ability of chemistry to drive the most complex of processes. Scientists continue to explore the RNA world hypothesis, searching for fossilized remnants of early RNA molecules and developing new experiments to recreate the conditions of early Earth. The discovery of RNA's role in viruses, which also rely heavily on RNA genetic material, further strengthens the argument for its central importance in the origin and evolution of life. The story of RNA's beginnings is a story of adaptability, self-replication, and the incredible potential hidden within the simplest of molecules. It's a story that reminds us that even the most complex things can start with something remarkably simple. The world was, for a very long time, quietly familiar. After the emergence of the first self-replicating molecules and the development of simple, single-celled organisms, life on Earth existed in a remarkably limited fashion. These early microbes, the ancestors of everything that followed, drifted through the oceans, consuming chemicals and existing in a relatively unchanging environment. For hundreds of millions of years, the dominant forms of life remained small, simple, and remarkably similar to one another. Then, something extraordinary happened. It began, abruptly, with a burst of astonishing innovation, an event scientists call the Cambrian explosion. This wasn't a slow, gradual transformation, but rather a period of explosive diversification, a sudden appearance of a huge variety of complex life forms within a geologically short time frame, roughly 541 to 518 million years ago. Before the Cambrian, the fossil record showed a sparse collection of small, often soft-bodied organisms, the Cambrian fog, representing a limited number of basic body plans. After the Cambrian, however, the rocks revealed a dazzling array of creatures, many of which are utterly unlike anything we see today. There were trilobites, with their distinctive segmented bodies and armored exoskeletons, Anomalocaris, a fearsome predator with grasping claws and powerful jaws, Hallucigenia, a bizarre creature with spines that initially looked like it was walking upside down, and a multitude of other organisms with shells, limbs, and intricate appendages. It was as if life suddenly decided to experiment with every possible form. The causes of this sudden diversification are still debated by scientists, and it's likely a combination of factors worked together. One key element was the rise of oxygen levels in the oceans and atmosphere. Before the Cambrian, oxygen was scarce, and many of the early life forms were adapted to anaerobic conditions, environments without free oxygen. As oxygen levels increased, it created new opportunities for life. Oxygen is a powerful oxidizing agent, meaning it readily combines with other elements. This led to the formation of new compounds, including iron oxides, which created banded iron formations, massive deposits of rock that are a hallmark of this period. These changes likely fueled the evolution of aerobic respiration, a much more efficient way for organisms to produce energy, allowing for larger, more active creatures. Another important factor was the evolution of skeletons and shells. The ability to create a hard, protective outer layer offered a significant advantage. Suddenly, organisms could defend themselves from predators, move more effectively across the seafloor, and exploit new niches in the environment. The evolution of shells, in particular, was a game changer. They provided support, protection, and even a platform for attachment, allowing organisms to colonize new habitats. Furthermore, the evolution of predator-prey relationships played a crucial role. As some organisms developed defenses like shells and skeletons, others evolved predatory adaptations, sharp teeth, claws, and sensory organs, to take advantage of these defenses. This created an arms race, driving further innovation and diversification. The appearance of predators spurred the evolution of evasive strategies in prey, and vice versa, generating a continuous cycle of evolutionary pressure. The Ediacaran biota, fossils found from slightly before the Cambrian, provide an intriguing context. These earlier fossils represent a range of soft-bodied organisms, some of which bear a resemblance to later Cambrian animals. However, they lacked many of the key features that define Cambrian animals, like segmented bodies and skeletons. It's possible that the Ediacaran biota formed the foundation upon which the Cambrian explosion was built, representing a transitional phase in the evolution of animal life. The Cambrian explosion wasn't just about the appearance of new species. It also involved significant changes in the way animals were organized. The evolution of bilateral symmetry, having a left and right side, became much more common, allowing animals to move more efficiently and to specialize their body parts. Segmentation, with its repeating units of body parts, also became a widespread feature, offering flexibility and adaptability. The development of complex sensory systems, eyes, antennae, and other organs, further enhanced animals' ability to interact with their environment. The precise timing and duration of the Cambrian explosion are still being refined as scientists analyze new fossils and utilize advanced dating techniques. However, the evidence overwhelmingly indicates that it was a pivotal moment in the history of life on Earth, marking the transition from a world dominated by simple, unstructured organisms to one teeming with diverse and complex animals. It's important to remember that the Cambrian explosion wasn't a single event, but rather a prolonged period of intense evolutionary activity. And while the fossil record provides us with a valuable glimpse of this period, much of what happened during the Cambrian explosion likely occurred in the absence of a fossil, within the soft tissues and fluid-filled bodies of the animals themselves. The study of the Cambrian explosion continues to reveal new insights into the origins of animal life, offering clues about the fundamental processes that drive evolution and the incredible diversity of life that exists today. It's a testament to the power of adaptation, the importance of ecological interactions, and the remarkable capacity of life to surprise us with its ingenuity and resilience. Thinking about the Cambrian explosion helps us understand why life on Earth is so varied and complex. It reminds us that change can be sudden, that innovation often arises from challenges, and that the history of life is a story of constant adaptation and transformation. It's a breathtaking reminder of the ongoing processes that have shaped our planet and the incredible journey of life itself. The early Earth was a very different place than it is today. It wasn't a vibrant green world teeming with plant life. For billions of years after the formation of the planet, the atmosphere was largely devoid of oxygen, a consequence of volcanic activity and the lack of any organisms capable of significantly altering it. It was a soup of gases, predominantly methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, punctuated by hydrogen sulfide smells that would be utterly unpalatable to us now. Life, in its earliest forms, relied on chemical energy, much like we see in certain bacteria today, extracting energy from inorganic compounds like iron and sulfur. These early microbes were the workhorses of a world struggling to find balance, steadily consuming and regenerating the elements around them. Then something extraordinary began to happen, a transformation that would fundamentally reshape the planet and ultimately pave the way for the complex life we know. It started with single-celled organisms, primitive bacteria that possessed a remarkable ability, the capacity to harness the energy of sunlight. This wasn't a sudden invention. It was a gradual refinement, a slow accumulation of biochemical processes. Initially, these early photosynthetic pathways weren't particularly efficient. They relied on pigments other than chlorophyll, like bacteria chlorophyll, to capture the available sunlight, which was predominantly ultraviolet radiation due to the absence of a protective ozone layer. These early pioneers were like tiny solar panels, quietly absorbing energy from the sun and using it to convert water and carbon dioxide into simple sugars. The crucial step in this process involved a pigment molecule called bacteria chlorophyll. This pigment, different from chlorophyll, was able to absorb different wavelengths of light, primarily in the infrared spectrum, which was abundant during that period. It's fascinating to consider how evolution operates, not with a grand design, but through a series of incremental improvements, each building upon the last. As these early photosynthetic bacteria flourished, they began to subtly change the atmospheric composition. Instead of simply recycling elements, they were actively removing carbon dioxide, a key component of the original atmosphere, and releasing, as a byproduct, molecules of hydrogen. However, the true game changer arrived with the evolution of chlorophyll. This green pigment, abundant in cyanobacteria, was far more efficient at capturing visible light, the light we see and use every day. The development of chlorophyll allowed these organisms to thrive in the brighter conditions that eventually emerged as the early atmosphere began to thin, and the sun's energy became more intensely focused on Earth. This shift was critical. As cyanobacteria multiplied, the removal of carbon dioxide accelerated dramatically, and the production of oxygen as a byproduct became a significant factor. The accumulation of oxygen in the atmosphere wasn't immediate. It happened over vast stretches of time, measured in millions of years. Initially, the oxygen produced was quickly consumed by reacting with iron dissolved in the shallow oceans. This created vast deposits of banded iron formations, distinctive layers of iron oxide and chert, which are some of the oldest sedimentary rocks on Earth. These formations represent a crucial period of oxygen storage, essentially a buffer against the rapid buildup. The oceans, once a rust-colored environment, gradually transitioned to a clearer, more hospitable state. As the iron was consumed, the oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere at a faster rate. This shift had profound consequences. Oxygen was highly reactive. It readily combined with other elements, particularly with iron, but it also had a dramatic impact on the evolution of life itself. Before oxygen, life was limited to anaerobic organisms, those that thrived in environments lacking free oxygen. Oxygen was toxic to many of these organisms, and its presence created a selective pressure favoring organisms that could tolerate or even utilize it. The rise of oxygen also allowed for the development of more complex metabolic pathways, pathways that required oxygen to function efficiently. This was the foundation for the evolution of aerobic respiration, a process that is far more efficient at generating energy from food than its anaerobic counterparts. This allowed organisms to grow larger and more complex, fueling the next wave of evolutionary innovation. The transition from an oxygen-poor atmosphere to an oxygen-rich one fundamentally altered the planet's surface. The oxidation of iron led to the formation of rust, a ubiquitous phenomenon today. It also dramatically changed the nature of the rocks themselves, transforming them into the diverse range of sedimentary rocks we see around the world. The increase in atmospheric oxygen also led to the formation of the ozone layer, a protective shield that absorbs harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun, making the surface of the Earth increasingly hospitable to life. Eventually, this oxygen-rich atmosphere supported the evolution of more complex organisms, including the first multicellular life forms. The ability to breathe oxygen allowed for vastly increased energy production, fueling growth, development, and ultimately, the ability to inhabit environments previously inaccessible to single-celled organisms. The story of photosynthesis isn't just the story of a biochemical process. It's the story of a planet's transformation, a slow, elegant dance between life and the environment, resulting in the world we inhabit today. It truly marks a monumental turning point in the history of our planet. The world after the Cambrian explosion wasn't a gentle, placid one. While many of the bizarre, often heavily armored creatures of that period continued to thrive, trilobites scuttling along the seafloor, sponges developing increasingly complex filtration systems, a new, incredibly efficient strategy for obtaining food had taken hold. It wasn't about building a fortress, it was about becoming the ultimate hunter. This shift centered around a revolutionary adaptation that would dramatically reshape the oceans and, ultimately, the trajectory of vertebrate evolution, the evolution of jaws. Before jaws, predation was a precarious affair. Creatures relied on brute strength, hard shells, and sometimes surprisingly effective sticky appendages to capture prey. Many of the larger Cambrian predators, like Opabinia with its 5 eyes and grasping proboscis, employed ambush tactics, waiting patiently for an unsuspecting meal to blunder within reach. But this was a game of chance, dependent on size and a considerable degree of luck. The sheer diversity of prey, ranging from armored arthropods to slow-moving mollusks, meant that a single, well-placed attack could destroy a predator. The first jawed vertebrates, appearing around 500 million years ago, were initially quite simple. They weren't instantly the fearsome killing machines we might envision. The earliest examples, like Halgodosaurus, possessed a relatively small, tooth-like structure, not a true tooth, but a cartilaginous projection used to grip and tear at soft-bodied prey. This was a significant improvement, offering a more reliable means of securing food, but it still wasn't particularly specialized. The jaw itself wasn't a single, rigid bone. Instead, it was formed by the modification of several bones in the cranium, creating a complex hinge-like structure capable of powerful, sideways movements. This new mechanism fundamentally altered the dynamics of feeding. Instead of simply crushing or grabbing, jawed vertebrates could precisely manipulate food, stripping flesh from bones with surprising delicacy. This opened up a vast new range of prey opportunities. Suddenly, creatures with relatively soft tissues like jellyfish or worms became accessible. The evolution of the jaw wasn't just about having a tool. It was about creating a system that could effectively exploit a previously inaccessible food source. The development of the jaw was intimately linked to the evolution of the swim bladder, an air-filled sac found in many fish today. Initially, the swim bladder likely served a simple buoyancy control function, helping fish maintain their depth. However, as jaws evolved, the swim bladder and jaw became increasingly integrated. The muscles attached to the jaw were anchored to the skull, and the skull itself was connected to the swim bladder via ligaments. This created a powerful, coordinated system for generating thrust, allowing fish to accelerate rapidly and precisely maneuver through the water. The efficiency of this system allowed jawed vertebrates to become increasingly dominant in the marine environment. Over millions of years, this evolutionary pathway led to the diversification of jawed groups, the placoderms, the chondrichthyi, sharks and rays, and ultimately, the actinopterygii, ray-finned fishes, which are the ancestors of almost all modern bony fish. The placoderms, an early group of jawed vertebrates, were particularly aggressive and had heavily armored bodies, showcasing the powerful hunting capabilities unlocked by the jaw. Some placoderms possessed enormous toothed jaws and were among the largest predators of their time. The rise of the sharks and rays represents a particularly fascinating chapter. These cartilaginous fish, lacking true bones, retained a more primitive jaw structure, relying on cartilage for support. However, their jaws were incredibly strong and their senses, particularly their electroreception, were exquisitely developed, making them superb ambush predators. They weren't simply relying on brute force, they were actively seeking out the electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of their prey. The evolutionary success of the actinopterygii, with their ray-finned skeletons, was a testament to the adaptability of the jawed vertebrate body plan. The flexibility of the ray fins allowed for unparalleled maneuverability, while the jaw provided a highly efficient feeding apparatus. This combination of factors allowed them to exploit a remarkable range of ecological niches, from open ocean predators to bottom-dwelling scavengers. The evolution of the swim bladder continued to be refined, becoming increasingly integrated with the skeletal system, further enhancing their swimming capabilities. It's important to remember that this wasn't a linear progression. There were countless experiments, extinctions, and adaptations along the way. Some jawed vertebrates persisted for millions of years before ultimately disappearing, while others evolved rapidly, filling ecological roles and contributing to the ongoing story of life on Earth. The jaw, ultimately, was more than just a tool. It was a catalyst for profound evolutionary change, fundamentally altering the dynamics of predation and setting the stage for the rise of the tetrapods, the first four-limbed vertebrates that would eventually leave the water and conquer the land. The legacy of the rise of jaws continues to shape the marine world to this day. The world after the Cambrian explosion was still a place of dramatic shifts, but a fundamental change was quietly taking root. The oceans, teeming with diverse life, were no longer the sole focus of evolutionary pressures. A new direction was emerging, a direction intimately linked to the changing atmosphere and a growing need to cope with fluctuating environmental conditions. This shift centered on a remarkable biological adaptation, the ability to generate and maintain a constant internal body temperature, endothermy. Initially, many animals relied on external sources of warmth, basking in the sun or seeking shelter in warm burrows. However, the increased oxygen levels in the atmosphere, a consequence of widespread photosynthesis, provided an opportunity for a more robust strategy. Oxygen, vital for respiration, also carried immense energy potential. The burgeoning metabolic rates of animals, especially larger ones, demanded a reliable supply of heat to fuel the complex chemical reactions necessary for survival. The earliest experiments with endothermy weren't achieved through complex physiological mechanisms. Instead, they were largely behavioral. Larger marine reptiles, particularly the placoderms, began to spend increasing amounts of time basking on beaches, absorbing heat directly from the sun. Their thick, armored bodies provided a good surface area for heat absorption, and their relatively slow metabolisms allowed them to effectively utilize the solar energy. This wasn't true endothermy in the sense we understand it today, but it represented a crucial step, a deliberate harnessing of an external heat source. Simultaneously, within the warmer waters, Certain fish species developed denser muscle tissue, creating a layer of insulation that minimized heat loss. These adaptations weren't immediate revolutions. They were gradual refinements, honed by natural selection over millions of years. The real turning point arrived with the evolution of the archosaurs, a group of reptiles that would ultimately give rise to dinosaurs. Early archosaurs exhibited a diverse range of body plans, some retaining aquatic lifestyles, others venturing onto land. However, a subset of these reptiles began to demonstrate a marked preference for warmer climates, particularly in the Triassic period. They possessed a certain inherent physiological plasticity, the capacity to adjust their metabolic rates in response to environmental cues. This plasticity, combined with the ongoing rise in global temperatures, created the perfect conditions for the development of true endothermy. The precise mechanisms are still being investigated, but researchers believe a combination of factors was key. Improved circulatory systems, more efficient muscle tissue, and a greater capacity for fat storage, acting as insulation and energy reserves, all played a role. The evolutionary pressures favoring this shift were immense. The Triassic was a period of intense competition for resources, and the ability to maintain a high body temperature gave dinosaurs a significant advantage. It allowed them to be active during cooler periods, exploit a wider range of food sources, and outcompete other reptiles, particularly the smaller, cold-blooded ones. The first dinosaurs weren't the towering giants we often picture. Rather, they were typically smaller, agile creatures, many of which were bipedal, granting them speed and agility in pursuit of prey. These early forms, like Herosaurus and Aeoraptor, were already demonstrating the benefits of increased metabolic activity. As dinosaurs diversified, so too did their endothermic capabilities. Larger species, particularly the sauropods, the long-necked giants, required enormous amounts of energy to fuel their massive bodies. Maintaining a constant, elevated temperature was essential for their survival, allowing them to support their immense size and the complex demands of their lifestyles. This led to further refinements in their circulatory systems, including the development of a four-chambered heart, which efficiently separated oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, maximizing oxygen delivery to the muscles. This was a critical innovation, allowing these colossal herbivores to sustain their extraordinary activity levels. The rise of dinosaurs wasn't a sudden, uniform event. It occurred in stages, with different dinosaur groups evolving endothermy at different rates. The theropods, the lineage that eventually gave rise to the iconic predators like Tyrannosaurus rex, were among the earliest and most effective endotherms. Their lean, muscular bodies, coupled with high metabolic rates, enabled them to become formidable hunters, capable of chasing down prey over long distances. The evolution of feathers in many theropods, initially likely for insulation and display, further enhanced their ability to regulate body temperature. By the Jurassic period, dinosaurs had firmly established themselves as the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. The ecosystem was largely shaped by their endothermic lifestyles, and their adaptations drove the evolution of other species. Plant life adapted to the warmer climate, and the food web became increasingly reliant on the energy generated by these heat-producing animals. The asteroid impact at the end of the Cretaceous, while devastating, ultimately paved the way for the rise of mammals, a group of smaller, more adaptable creatures that, lacking the extreme endothermy of the dinosaurs, were able to survive and eventually flourish. The legacy of the dinosaurs, fundamentally shaped by their mastery of internal heat, continues to resonate in the biology of modern animals, a testament to the power of adaptation and the enduring influence of the changing world. The world was a very different place 66 million years ago. Giant ferns carpeted the continents, towering sequoia trees stretched towards the sun, and the air was thick with the calls of enormous reptiles. Dinosaurs, in a dazzling array of shapes and sizes, dominated nearly every ecosystem. Some, like the long-necked herbivores, browsed on the highest branches, while others, the fearsome predators such as Tyrannosaurus rex, ruled the land with terrifying power. The ecosystem was complex and finely tuned, a testament to millions of years of evolutionary development. Then, everything changed. A large asteroid, estimated to be around 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter, was hurtling through space. It wasn't alone. It was part of a chaotic stream of debris ejected from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. This debris was constantly bombarded by gravitational influences, sending pieces flying in all directions. The asteroid's trajectory, influenced by the subtle tugs of the planets, brought it inexorably closer to Earth. Scientists believe this event was triggered by a collision between two asteroids within the asteroid belt, a violent dance of space rocks. The asteroid entered the Earth's atmosphere at an incredible speed, roughly 25 kilometers per second. As it plunged through the atmosphere, it encountered resistance, generating immense friction. This friction caused the asteroid to heat up to unimaginable temperatures, hotter than the surface of the sun. The atmosphere, normally a protective layer, became a blazing inferno. It didn't simply burn up. Instead, the extreme heat caused the asteroid to explode in a colossal burst of energy. This explosion created a gigantic fireball, illuminating the entire planet for days, perhaps weeks. The immediate effects were devastating. The atmospheric explosion sent a tremendous shockwave across the globe, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on a scale never before witnessed. But the most significant impact occurred when fragments of the asteroid, now superheated and traveling at incredible speeds, rained down upon the Earth's surface. These impacts weren't localized. They were distributed across vast areas, creating numerous craters, the largest being the Chicxulub crater, now located beneath the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The energy released by these impacts was staggering. It's estimated that the energy equivalent of billions of atomic bombs was unleashed in a very short period. The ground beneath many continents was vaporized instantly. Massive tsunamis, hundreds of meters high, surged across the oceans, inundating coastal regions and washing away everything in their path. Dust, ash, and sulfur-rich particles were ejected high into the atmosphere, blotting out the sun. This prolonged darkness, lasting for months, fundamentally altered the planet's ability to sustain life. The effects on plant life were immediate and catastrophic. Without sunlight, the primary producers, the plants, could not perform photosynthesis. This effectively shut down the entire food chain. Herbivores, reliant on plants for sustenance, starved. Carnivores, who depended on herbivores, soon followed. The sheer scale of the devastation was unprecedented. Ecosystems that had evolved over millions of years collapsed within a remarkably short time frame. The survival rate of many species plummeted. While some smaller animals, particularly those capable of burrowing or seeking shelter, managed to survive the initial impact and the subsequent environmental changes, the larger dinosaurs, the giants that had dominated the planet for so long, faced an almost insurmountable challenge. Their massive size, coupled with the sudden and dramatic changes in their environment, made it impossible for them to adapt quickly enough. The extinction event wasn't a single, instantaneous event. It was a complex, multi-stage process. The initial impact triggered immediate devastation, followed by prolonged darkness, climate change, and widespread environmental disruption. The atmosphere filled with gases like carbon dioxide, which caused a significant rise in global temperatures. The sulfur released from the impact and subsequent volcanic activity further exacerbated the cooling effect, creating a chaotic and unstable climate. While the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event wiped out approximately 76% of plant and animal species on Earth, it paved the way for the rise of a new group of animals, mammals. Smaller, more adaptable, and capable of thriving in the altered conditions, mammals gradually diversified and filled the ecological niches left vacant by the extinction of the dinosaurs. They slowly evolved, learning to exploit the changing environment and ultimately becoming the dominant life form on Earth, including, eventually, humans. The Chicxulub impact represents a pivotal moment in Earth's history, a stark reminder of the powerful forces that shape our planet and the fragility of life. It serves as a dramatic illustration of how a single, seemingly small event can have profound and lasting consequences, shaping the course of evolution and determining the fate of entire species. It's a story of destruction, resilience, and, ultimately, transformation, a story that continues to unfold today. The world during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods was dominated by dinosaurs, a colossal kingdom built on immense size, incredible strength, and remarkably efficient evolutionary strategies. Yet, even amidst this reptilian reign, a tiny, unassuming group of animals was quietly beginning its journey, the ancestors of mammals. These weren't the lumbering behemoths we often picture. Initially, they were small, nocturnal creatures, far removed from the iconic forms of modern mammals. They represented a lineage clinging to survival, exploiting niches the larger dinosaurs hadn't fully utilized. These early mammals, often called Thershians, were mostly shrew-sized, with tooth roots that were flexible and didn't form complete sockets in the jawbone. This unusual feature allowed them to chew food in a more versatile way than their dinosaur contemporaries. Their existence was a constant balancing act, a strategy of stealth and adaptation. They inhabited the shadows of the forests, seeking refuge in the burrows of larger reptiles or within dense vegetation. Their diet consisted largely of insects, small amphibians, and perhaps some scavenging opportunities, benefiting from the carcasses left behind by the more dramatic predators. Fossil evidence suggests a remarkable diversity within this group, with variations in size and tooth morphology indicating adaptation to a range of food sources. Some Thershian species developed denser fur, providing insulation against the relatively cooler temperatures of the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous. The evolution of this insulating layer was linked to a shift in their activity patterns. As the planet began to cool slightly, becoming less consistently warm, the ability to retain heat became increasingly important. The ecological pressures exerted by dinosaurs were immense, demanding significant evolutionary responses from their smaller rivals. The larger predators like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus relied on speed and powerful bites. The Thershians, conversely, evolved a more cautious, opportunistic approach. Their smaller size and nocturnal habits shielded them from direct confrontation. However, they weren't simply avoiding danger. They were also developing subtle advantages. The flexible tooth roots, already a key feature, played a role in their ability to process food efficiently, and certain species started displaying rudimentary versions of parental care, grooming and protecting their young, suggesting a nascent understanding of social bonds. As the Cretaceous progressed, the environment continued to shift, and the dinosaurs faced escalating competition and increasingly sophisticated predation. The rise of carnosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex demonstrated a relentless pressure for larger, more powerful predators. The Thershian lineage, while not evolving into dominant forms, continued to diversify, displaying characteristics that would eventually give rise to the mammals we know today. The development of larger brains, though initially slow, began in some smaller Thershian groups, driven by the need to navigate complex environments and to learn hunting strategies. This early encephalization, the increase in brain size relative to body size, marks a pivotal moment in their evolutionary trajectory. Several key anatomical innovations began to appear, precursors to the defining traits of mammals. The development of the middle ear, with its tiny bones, allowed for improved hearing, aiding in predator detection and communication. The expansion of the jaw joint, which eventually led to the separation of the skull from the rest of the skeleton, provided greater flexibility and control during chewing. Furthermore, there's mounting evidence suggesting the initial development of a rudimentary placenta, a system for nourishing developing young, although it wasn't yet the complex, fully developed structure seen in modern mammals. The distribution of Thursian fossils across the globe provides a fascinating picture of their adaptability. They were found in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, demonstrating that the lineage had spread and diversified across a range of climates and environments. It's important to remember that the fossil record is incomplete. Many Thursian species likely vanished without leaving a trace, lost to the relentless forces of evolution and extinction. However, the existing fossils paint a clear picture. This tiny group was not simply surviving, it was steadily accumulating the building blocks for a dramatic transformation. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event, a catastrophic upheaval that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs, presented both a challenge and an opportunity for the Thursian lineage. The sudden removal of so much large-scale predation allowed the smaller, more adaptable mammals to flourish. They quickly filled the ecological voids, exploiting new resources and demonstrating an astonishing ability to evolve rapidly in response to environmental change. The mammals that survived the asteroid impact weren't the descendants of the early Thursians in their original form. They were the products of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. It's a remarkable story of resilience, a testament to the power of adaptation. The journey from those tiny, shadowed creatures to the immense diversity of mammals we see today represents one of the most profound and successful evolutionary transitions in the history of life on Earth. The dinosaur age concluded, but the seed of mammalian dominance had already been sown, nurtured by the very survival of this unassuming group, forever altering the course of life on our planet. The world after the asteroid impact was a vastly different place. The familiar landscapes sculpted by dinosaurs for millennia were scarred and broken. Giant ferns still dominated, and the air, though cleaner than it had been during the reign of the reptiles, still held the memory of colossal creatures. The surviving mammals, tiny and often nocturnal, huddled in the shadows, their evolutionary pathways suddenly, brutally narrowed. Their future depended on adaptability, on seizing every opportunity presented by the chaos. Among these survivors were the ancestors of many of the animals we know today, the shrews, the moles, the small carnivores that would eventually shape the continents. But the greatest drama of this early post-extinction era was yet to unfold, a monumental migration across the vast oceans separating North America from Europe and ultimately South America. The geological story behind this movement is a captivating one. The Atlantic Ocean, which now separates the Americas from Europe and Africa, wasn't always there. During the late Cretaceous period, the continents were joined together in a supercontinent called Pangaea. This meant that North America and Europe were essentially connected, allowing for uninterrupted movement of animals and plants. However, as the forces of plate tectonics began to shift, Pangaea started to break apart. This process, driven by the slow, grinding movement of the Earth's crust, created a gradual rift between the continents. The sea level rose, flooding the basins where the land had once been, and the process of separation continued, accelerating in the millennia following the extinction event. During this time of continental drift, certain mammal groups were particularly well suited to undertake long-distance journeys. The earliest examples were primarily small carnivores, the ancestors of weasels, foxes, and martens, but also included early forms of the rodents. These animals possessed several key adaptations that made them capable of surviving harsh conditions and traveling considerable distances. They had relatively high metabolisms, allowing them to sustain energy expenditure during migration. They were agile, with flexible bodies capable of navigating challenging terrain, and possessed a remarkable sense of smell, crucial for locating food and identifying safe routes. Perhaps most importantly, they were opportunistic feeders, consuming a wide range of prey, including insects, small reptiles, and seeds, increasing their chances of survival in unfamiliar environments. The initial crossings were likely sporadic and punctuated by periods of instability, as the continents continued their relentless movement. Some mammals, perhaps driven by dwindling resources in their native habitats or simply by instinct, would attempt to cross the rising seas, only to be thwarted by changing water levels or the emergence of new barriers. However, as the rift between the continents deepened, these crossings became more frequent and reliable. The formation of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a massive underwater mountain range created by the volcanic activity associated with plate tectonics, inadvertently created a series of islands and land bridges, offering stepping stones for migrating mammals. These volcanic formations provided temporary havens, offering refuge and access to fresh water. The most dramatic period of this migration occurred over tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years. The arrival of the North American mammals in Europe wasn't a single, sudden event, but a gradual influx, with different groups arriving at different times. Initially smaller, more adaptable carnivores were the most successful, establishing themselves in the fragmented landscapes of Europe. As they thrived, they began to exert pressure on the existing European fauna, the primitive forms of bears, deer, and wolves that had survived the extinction. Competition for resources led to a selective pressure, favoring the more adaptable North American mammals. The arrival of larger mammals, such as the ancestors of the beaver and the muskrat, was particularly significant. These animals were capable of constructing dams and altering waterways, further reshaping the European landscape and creating new habitats for other mammals. The seeds they dispersed along with their activities played a crucial role in the re-establishment of plant life, contributing to the gradual recovery of the continent's ecosystems. It's a remarkable example of how a few determined animals, driven by instinct and circumstance, can profoundly impact an entire ecosystem. The process wasn't just a one-way street. While North American mammals dominated Europe, animals from Europe, specifically the ancestors of the wild boar and the red deer, began to make their way across the Atlantic, eventually reaching South America. This reciprocal migration further complicated the already complex picture of species distribution and evolutionary relationships in the New World. The arrival of these European animals in South America helped to diversify the fauna of the continent, leading to the evolution of unique species adapted to the specific conditions of that region. This Great American Interchange, as it's often called, represents one of the most significant events in the history of life on Earth. It demonstrated the power of adaptation, the resilience of mammals, and the profound impact of geological forces on the distribution and evolution of species. It reshaped the landscapes of both continents, creating the diverse fauna we see today, a legacy born from the aftermath of a cataclysmic event and the relentless movement of our planet's continents. It is a quiet story of survival, of journey, and of the remarkable ability of life to find a way, even in the face of unimaginable change. The world after the KPG event was a vastly different place. The giant dinosaurs were gone, leaving a gaping hole in the ecological landscape. But life, as always, found a way. The immediate aftermath saw a surge in smaller, adaptable creatures, the ancestors of many mammals we recognize today. Among these were the early primates, not the familiar, brightly colored monkeys and apes, but small, shrew-like animals, often no bigger than a squirrel. These creatures, belonging to the group known as strepsirrhines, began to explore the newly available niches. They were primarily nocturnal, relying on their keen sense of smell and hearing to navigate the darker corners of the forests, a legacy of their ancient, secretive ancestors. These early primates were opportunistic omnivores, consuming insects, fruits, and small vertebrates. Their teeth were adapted for both gripping and gnawing, reflecting a diet that shifted as resources became available. Over millions of years, the strepsirrhines diversified, spreading across Africa and Eurasia. Some lineages flourished, while others faded into extinction, shaped by climate shifts and competition with other emerging mammals. However, a particularly successful group, The tarsiers, tiny, nocturnal primates found only in Southeast Asia, began to exhibit traits that would eventually characterize the lineage leading to humans. They possessed larger eyes, adapted for low-light vision, and developed a more specialized reliance on their hands for grasping and manipulating objects. These hands were increasingly refined, representing a crucial step toward the complex dexterity we associate with primates today. The evolutionary pressures favoring these adaptations were likely related to a shift towards greater reliance on arboreal tree-dwelling lifestyles, offering protection from ground-based predators and access to a wider range of food sources. Simultaneously, in Africa, another primate lineage was quietly evolving, the haplorhines. This group, encompassing the monkeys and apes, was initially less diverse than the strepsirrhines, but possessed features that would eventually dominate the primate world. Haplorhines had a broader nose structure and a different skull shape, offering a distinct evolutionary pathway. It's believed that the split between the two groups occurred relatively early, perhaps as early as 55 million years ago, though the exact timing remains a subject of ongoing research. As the climate continued to change, with periods of cooling and drying, the pressure mounted for primates to adapt to new challenges. This led to further refinements in locomotion, a move towards greater reliance on bipedalism, or walking on two legs. The initial steps towards bipedalism in the haplorhines were subtle. Fossil evidence suggests that early apes, like Dryopithecus, spent considerable time in trees, but occasionally ventured onto the ground, perhaps to forage for fruits or to cross open areas. These early attempts at walking upright were likely awkward and inefficient, representing an experiment in a different way of moving. The advantages were slowly becoming apparent, freeing up the hands for carrying objects, gaining a better vantage point for spotting predators, and reducing ground-level exposure. The crucial factor wasn't necessarily a sudden transformation, but rather a gradual accumulation of adaptations over countless generations. Around 6 million years ago, a truly remarkable lineage emerged in Africa, Sahelanthropus tichadensis. This fossil, nicknamed Taumai, possessed a surprisingly human-like face and a foramen magnum, the hole at the base of the skull where the spinal cord connects, positioned in a way that suggested an upright posture. While Sahelanthropus wasn't a fully formed hominin, a member of the human lineage, it represented a pivotal moment, offering compelling evidence that the roots of our own ancestry were already taking hold. Following Sahelanthropus, the fossil record began to reveal other early hominins, such as Ardipithecus ramidus, with its uniquely shaped foot, indicating a mix of arboreal and bipedal locomotion. The genus Australopithecus, appearing around 4 million years ago, is perhaps the most well-known early hominin. Species like Australopithecus afarensis, famously represented by the Lucy fossil, displayed a more habitually bipedal gait than their predecessors. Their brains were still relatively small, but their skeletal structure clearly favored upright walking. Importantly, Australopithecus retained some ape-like features, such as longer arms, reflecting a continued need for climbing and arboreal movement. These hominins were clearly experimenting with different ways of moving and interacting with their environment, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Around 2.5 million years ago, Homo emerged, marking the beginning of the genus that would ultimately lead to modern humans. The earliest Homo species, such as Homo habilis, were characterized by slightly larger brains than their Australopithecus counterparts and evidence of tool use. The ability to manufacture and utilize simple stone tools represented a profound shift in the hominin's relationship with the environment, providing access to new food sources and enhancing survival capabilities. As the climate continued to fluctuate and grasslands expanded in Africa, Homo species began to specialize in exploiting these open environments, further driving the evolution of bipedalism and the development of increasingly sophisticated tools. The story of the hominins is a story of adaptation, experimentation, and ultimately, the dawn of a new branch in the history of life on Earth. A branch that would eventually lead to you and me. The savanna stretched endlessly, a sea of golden grasses under a vast, open sky. It was a landscape sculpted by time, shaped by the movements of colossal herbivores and the predators that hunted them. Amongst this dynamic scene, a small group of hominins, our ancestors, were beginning to show a remarkable shift, a subtle yet profound change that would ultimately define their destiny. These weren't the powerfully built Australopithecines of the past. They possessed a leaner build, a slightly more upright posture, and a burgeoning curiosity about their surroundings. This particular group, Homo habilis, roughly translating to handy man, was marking the beginning of a critical transformation, the capacity for tool use. The initial evidence for this emergence wasn't grand or obvious. It wasn't a sudden invention of complex weaponry, but rather a slow accumulation of small, simple innovations. Fossil discoveries, primarily in the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, began to reveal the presence of flakes of stone, lithic flakes, alongside the remains of animals that had been butchered. These weren't carefully crafted tools, not yet. They were primarily choppers, chunks of stone, roughly shaped to smash open bones and crack open nuts. The rationale was clear. Accessing the nutrient-rich marrow inside animal bones was a vital adaptation, offering a concentrated source of energy in a world where food was a constant struggle. The simple act of using a stone to break open a bone represented a fundamental shift in how Homo habilis interacted with their environment. The process of making these early tools, known as Alduin technology, was itself a complex undertaking. It wasn't simply picking up a rock and smashing it. It involved a sequence of actions: selecting a suitable stone, often quartzite or basalt, examining its shape and texture, testing its strength by tapping it against another stone, and then carefully striking it with a heavier stone, like a core stone, to detach a flake. The shape and size of the flakes produced varied depending on the force of the blow and the angle of the strike. This experimentation, this iterative process of trial and error, demonstrated a level of cognitive ability previously unseen in hominins. It signified the beginnings of problem solving, the application of physical force to achieve a desired outcome. The significance of tool use extended far beyond simply obtaining food. It fundamentally altered the way Homo habilis perceived and interacted with the world. Tools provided a means of manipulating their environment, of modifying it to suit their needs. This ability to alter their surroundings conferred a crucial advantage over other animals, allowing them to exploit resources more efficiently and to adapt to changing conditions. Moreover, the creation and use of tools likely stimulated further cognitive development. The constant need to observe, to experiment, and to refine techniques fostered an increase in brain size and complexity. As Homo habilis became more proficient in tool use, the range of tasks they could accomplish expanded dramatically. They could not only butcher animals for their meat but also process plant foods, grinding seeds and roots into a paste. They could defend themselves against predators, using sharpened stones as projectiles or as defensive weapons. The development of the hand axe, a carefully shaped stone tool, represents a further step in this progression. While still relatively simple, the hand axe demonstrates a greater level of skill and control. It was a versatile tool that could be used for a variety of purposes, including cutting, scraping, and hammering. The spread of Alduin technology wasn't uniform. Different groups of Homo habilis across Africa developed their own slightly distinct techniques, reflecting local environmental conditions and available resources. However, the core principles, selecting a suitable stone, shaping it to produce flakes, and utilizing those flakes for various tasks, remained consistent. The accumulation of these small, incremental innovations, spread through learning and imitation, laid the foundation for the more sophisticated tool technologies that would emerge in later hominin species. The rise of tool use in Homo habilis wasn't simply a matter of physical dexterity. It was a profound evolutionary leap. It represents a pivotal moment in the history of our lineage, demonstrating the capacity for abstract thought, planning, and innovation that would eventually lead to the emergence of Homo erectus and ultimately Homo sapiens. It's a reminder that even the smallest of changes, the simplest of inventions, can have a monumental impact on the course of life itself. The legacy of handyman, Homo habilis, remains etched in the fossil record, a testament to the power of curiosity, ingenuity, and the remarkable ability of our ancestors to shape their world. It was a beginning, a single step on a long and winding path towards the future we inhabit today. The story of humanity isn't just one road, you see. It's a tangled network of branches, of migrations and encounters, of shared and distinct evolutionary paths. For a long time, our understanding of those paths was built primarily on fossil evidence, the bones we found, the tools they left behind. But over the last couple of decades, a revolutionary new source of information has emerged, the Neanderthal genome. It's like holding a key to a much older and remarkably close chapter in our family's history. Initially, scientists were trying to understand how Neanderthals differed from modern humans. They expected vast differences, perhaps a completely distinct lineage, shaped by very different environmental pressures. The early sequencing efforts, starting in 2007 with the famous draft Neanderthal genome, revealed a surprising degree of similarity. Around 90% of the DNA sequences were identical to those found in a modern human, specifically a European individual. This immediately presented a problem. It suggested a much closer relationship than previously assumed, challenging the prevailing view of Neanderthals as a distant, primitive relative. Further research, involving the analysis of multiple Neanderthal genomes recovered from various sites across Europe and Asia, including remains from Denisova Cave in Siberia, which yielded DNA from a previously unknown hominin group called the Denisovans, steadily refined our understanding. The Denisovan genome, in particular, proved to be a critical piece of the puzzle. It demonstrated that multiple archaic human groups, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and potentially others, had interbred with early modern humans, creating a mosaic of ancestral genes within the human population today. One of the most fascinating discoveries revolves around the genes involved in immune response. Neanderthal genomes contain a remarkable abundance of genes related to the adaptive immune system, particularly those involved in fighting off viruses. This wasn't just a coincidence. It suggests that Neanderthals faced constant pressure from infectious diseases, likely due to their colder climate habitats and close proximity to animals carrying pathogens. When modern humans migrated into Europe, bringing with them a relatively limited repertoire of immune genes, there was a significant gene flow, a transfer of Neanderthal immune genes into the European population. This likely played a role in the early survival and adaptation of the first Europeans. Beyond immunity, the Neanderthal genome has offered insights into their physical characteristics. Several genes associated with skin pigmentation were identified, suggesting that Neanderthals had darker skin than modern Europeans. This aligns with archaeological evidence indicating they lived in regions with higher levels of sunlight exposure. Another set of genes involved in bone structure was also uncovered, explaining why Neanderthal skeletons tend to have denser and thicker bones than those of modern humans, an adaptation to the harsh, cold climates they inhabited. The analysis also revealed a significant number of Neanderthal genes that appear to have been lost from the modern human genome after the initial interbreeding events. These ghost genes, as some researchers have called them, likely contributed to subtle differences in our physiology and metabolism. However, Determining the precise functional impact of these lost genes is a complex challenge, often requiring sophisticated modeling and comparison with similar genes in other species. Furthermore, the Neanderthal genome provides evidence of cultural adaptations. Certain genes involved in the production of myoglobin, a protein crucial for oxygen transport in muscles, were found to be more variable within the Neanderthal population than in modern humans. This suggests that Neanderthals were skilled hunters and had developed sophisticated strategies for tracking and pursuing large game animals in diverse environments. The level of genetic diversity hints at a greater range of hunting techniques and adaptations to varying terrain. The discovery of Neanderthal genes involved in regulating blood pressure also sheds light on their potential adaptation to the high altitudes they inhabited. It's a remarkable example of how genetic variation, generated through long periods of evolution and facilitated by interbreeding, could be a crucial factor in allowing populations to thrive in challenging environments. Perhaps the most profound implication of the Neanderthal genome research is the realization that our own evolutionary story is far more interconnected and complex than we previously imagined. We are not simply a single lineage, but rather a product of a vast, interwoven history of hominin populations. The genetic legacy of Neanderthals, and to a lesser extent, of other archaic humans like the Denisovans, is woven into the fabric of our DNA, a silent testament to these ancient cousins who shared our planet for hundreds of thousands of years. The ongoing research continues to uncover new details, pushing the boundaries of our understanding. Scientists are using advanced techniques like whole genome sequencing and comparative genomics to decipher the full significance of the Neanderthal genetic legacy. It's a field that's constantly evolving, revealing new surprises and shaping our understanding of what it means to be human. It reminds us that the story of life on Earth is a continuous narrative, one where the chapters are constantly being rewritten by the evidence we uncover. The last ice age, a period of profound change across the planet, was nearing its end. Homo sapiens, having emerged from the shadows of earlier hominins in Africa, possessed a combination of traits: a remarkably adaptable cognitive capacity, increasingly sophisticated tool-making skills, and a growing social structure that propelled them outwards from their origins. The shrinking glaciers, revealing new territories and resources, acted as a catalyst for this expansion. Initially, their movements were largely confined to the Mediterranean region, following herds of animals like a clever hunter. But soon, driven by population growth and a desire for new hunting grounds, they began a systematic exploration of Eurasia and eventually the Americas. Their arrival in Europe wasn't a sudden conquest, but rather a gradual process of migration and interaction with existing populations, including Neanderthals. The displacement of Neanderthals, a complex event influenced by competition for resources and potentially the introduction of diseases to which they had no immunity, is a topic of ongoing research. Archaeological evidence increasingly suggests a level of cultural exchange alongside the competitive dynamics. Homo sapiens adopted and modified tools from Neanderthal cultures, and in return, shared their own innovations. This wasn't a clear-cut story of one species dominating the other, but a dynamic interplay of adaptation and survival. As Homo sapiens spread across Europe, they brought with them a fundamentally different relationship with the landscape. Unlike many of the animals they hunted, they didn't rely on a single, predictable migration pattern. Instead, their movements were dictated by factors like food availability, population density, and expanding settlements. This led to a significant alteration of habitats. Forests were cleared for agriculture and settlement. Grasslands were transformed for grazing livestock, a practice that would have been entirely alien to many of the large herbivores they pursued. The impact on megafauna, the colossal animals that had dominated the Pleistocene epoch, was particularly dramatic. The extinction of woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths, and several species of rhinoceroses across vast regions of Eurasia and North America coincides almost perfectly with the arrival of Homo sapiens. While the exact cause of this megafaunal extinction event is debated, mounting evidence points to a major contribution from human activity. Hunting pressure, undoubtedly exacerbated by population growth, reduced animal numbers. But the story is more nuanced than simply humans hunted them to extinction. The creation of new environments, the establishment of farmland, the modification of forests, fragmented animal habitats, making it increasingly difficult for these large animals to find food and shelter. The ecological cascade effects, the loss of a keystone species triggering a chain reaction throughout the ecosystem, amplified the impact. The spread across the Americas followed a similar pattern. Beginning around 15,000 years ago, Homo sapiens moved northward from their initial footholds in Mexico, rapidly colonizing the entire continent. Their presence, coupled with similar changes in land use and hunting practices, again resulted in the decline and extinction of many native megafauna species, including saber-toothed cats, giant bison, and short-faced bears. The distances traveled, the sheer scale of the continent, and the relatively recent arrival of humans compared to the established ecosystems created a particularly vulnerable situation for many species. The impact wasn't limited to large animals. Homo sapiens dramatically altered plant communities as well. The cultivation of crops, wheat, barley, rice, maize, transformed vast areas of land into agricultural landscapes, replacing natural vegetation with domesticated plants. This process fundamentally altered soil composition, water cycles, and the availability of resources for other species. The introduction of livestock also had a significant impact on vegetation, as animals grazed and trampled upon native plants. As Homo sapiens continued to spread and diversify, their ecological footprint grew. The development of more complex societies, with larger populations and greater demands for resources, led to an intensification of these impacts. The construction of settlements, the creation of irrigation systems, and the development of specialized crafts all contributed to the alteration of landscapes. It's important to remember that this wasn't necessarily a malicious process. It was simply the consequence of a species adapting to its environment and building a more complex way of life. However, the scale and intensity of this transformation were unprecedented, creating a new set of ecological challenges. The planet was being reshaped by the activities of a single species, and the consequences would ripple through the ecosystems for millennia to come. The story of Homo sapiens' spread is, ultimately, a story about adaptation, innovation, and the profound and lasting impact of a species on the world around it. The shift from a life wholly dependent on foraging began gradually, a slow unfolding rather than a sudden revolution. Early humans, already skilled at utilizing tools for hunting and gathering, were observant. They noticed patterns, the predictable blooming of certain plants after seasonal rains, the cycles of animal migration dictated by available food sources, the way specific locations consistently provided richer harvests. This keen observation, combined with a practical understanding of resource management, laid the groundwork for something truly transformative: the domestication of plants and animals. Initially, this wasn't about deliberately cultivating fields. It was about learning to exploit wild populations more effectively. Humans began intentionally gathering seeds from plants with desirable traits, larger fruits, easier to harvest grains, those that grew in particularly fertile areas. They'd store these seeds, carefully selecting the best ones for replanting, essentially beginning a process of directed selection. Similarly, they started keeping close tabs on herds of animals, understanding their movement patterns, and even, over time, manipulating their behavior through herding techniques. The earliest evidence of this burgeoning relationship appears in the Fertile Crescent, a region encompassing parts of modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. Here, around 10,000 BC, wild wheat and barley were first systematically cultivated. The climate of the Fertile Crescent, a region of reliable rainfall and warm temperatures, proved exceptionally favorable for these cereals. Humans weren't simply collecting seeds, they were creating controlled environments, clearing land to encourage optimal growth, and using simple irrigation systems, ditches, and canals to manage water flow. This marked a significant step. Agriculture wasn't just about taking what nature offered, it was about shaping the landscape to meet human needs. The development of the plow, though initially a simple wooden tool, provided a massive increase in the amount of land that could be cultivated, accelerating this process. The impact on human societies was profound. With a reliable food supply, settlements became permanent. No longer driven by the constant search for sustenance, people could dedicate their time and energy to other pursuits, crafts, trade, and eventually complex social structures. Villages grew into towns and towns into cities. This population density led to increased competition for resources, and consequently, the development of formal systems of governance, law, and defense. The surplus generated by agriculture also allowed for specialization of labor. Not everyone needed to be a hunter or gatherer. Some could become potters, weavers, metalworkers, or traders, creating a more diverse and complex economy. Social hierarchies began to emerge, with individuals holding positions of power based on wealth, land ownership, and influence. But the transformation wasn't solely driven by human innovation. The environment itself responded to these changes. As humans cleared land for agriculture, forests were reduced, and grasslands and woodlands were transformed into open fields. This dramatically altered local ecosystems. The introduction of domesticated animals, sheep, goats, pigs, further impacted the landscape. Grazing animals trampled vegetation, leading to soil erosion, and their waste enriched the soil, creating patches of particularly fertile land, further accelerating the expansion of agriculture. The deliberate planting of crops also created a mosaic of different habitats, fields of cereals, orchards, vineyards, increasing biodiversity in some areas. Although overall, the reduction of wild spaces was a significant consequence. The spread of agriculture from the Fertile Crescent outwards was not a uniform process. It followed trade routes, spread along river valleys, and was adopted by different cultures at different rates. In China, rice cultivation developed independently, evolving with its own unique techniques and innovations. In Mesoamerica, maize corn became a cornerstone of civilization, profoundly shaping the cultures of the Maya and Aztec. Each region adapted agricultural practices to suit its particular environment and resources, demonstrating the remarkable adaptability of both humans and plants. However, the long-term consequences of this shift are complex and often viewed with a critical eye. The intense focus on maximizing yields sometimes led to unsustainable practices, over-reliance on single crops, depletion of soil fertility, and ultimately, vulnerability to environmental changes. The intensive cultivation of land also frequently resulted in the displacement of indigenous populations, as agricultural communities encroached upon their territories and resources. The story of agriculture, therefore, is not simply one of human progress. It is a story of a fundamental relationship between humans and the natural world, a relationship that continues to shape our planet today. It's a reminder of the powerful influence humans have and the responsibility that comes with it. The shifting sands of the African savanna hadn't just witnessed the gradual rise and fall of hominin species. It was also, silently and profoundly, hosting the very beginnings of something utterly transformative: complex communication. For millions of years, our ancestors, the Homo genus, had relied primarily on gestures, facial expressions, and perhaps a basic understanding of vocalizations, sufficient for coordinating hunts or warning of danger. But something was stirring. a nascent capacity for constructing and interpreting increasingly intricate sound-based signals. The key wasn't simply hearing. It was the ability to associate particular sounds with specific objects, actions, and, crucially, mental states. Early forms of this communication likely involved what we might now term proto-language, a system of simplified signals that could convey immediate needs and observations. A sharp grunt might indicate a nearby predator, while a repeated clicking sound could signal the presence of food. However, the true leap in cognitive evolution began with the emergence of a system where the signal itself carried meaning beyond its direct correlation with the event. This involved the ability to refer to things that weren't immediately present, to discuss something that had been seen, smelled, or experienced at some other time or location. The precise mechanisms behind this shift are still a subject of intense scientific investigation. It's hypothesized that changes in the vocal tract, specifically, a lowering of the larynx, played a significant role. This anatomical modification, gradually becoming more pronounced across the Homo lineage, allowed for a wider range of vocalizations, finer control over pitch and tone, and ultimately, the production of sounds capable of distinguishing between subtle variations in meaning. Furthermore, coinciding with these physical changes was an increasing specialization within the brain, particularly in areas associated with auditory processing, and importantly, with symbolic thought. Evidence for this gradual development comes from a variety of sources. Archaeological discoveries of carefully crafted objects, tools made with remarkable precision, suggest a level of planning and instruction following that could only have been facilitated by a system of communication that went beyond simple pointing. The deliberate placement of ochre pigments across cave walls, the creation of intricate engravings, and the construction of complex shelters all hint at a need to transmit knowledge and ideas. The evolution of syntax, the rule-governed structure of sentences, was likely a more protracted process. Initially, communication probably relied on chains of signals, where each signal built upon the previous one, creating a basic narrative. The gradual development of grammatical rules, allowing for the flexible combination of these signals, represented a profound cognitive advance. Consider the simple act of describing an object. Early hominins might have simply pointed and grunted, but as language evolved, they began to incorporate descriptive elements, relating the object to other objects and concepts. The red stone, sharp, used to cut. This simple sentence demonstrates the ability to represent an object and its function, allowing for shared understanding and the accumulation of knowledge. The emergence of theory of mind, the understanding that others have thoughts, beliefs, and intentions different from one's own, is intimately linked with the development of complex language. Sharing intentions and coordinating actions requires a sophisticated ability to represent the mental states of others. Language provided the necessary scaffolding for this capability, allowing us to discuss possibilities, plan for the future, and engage in collaborative problem-solving. It's fascinating to contemplate how language fostered a sense of self. The ability to reflect on one's own experiences, to narrate one's life, and to construct a personal narrative contributes to the formation of an individual identity. This capacity for introspection, fundamentally shaped by linguistic abilities, separates us dramatically from other animals. The increasing complexity of language also had a profound effect on social structures. Groups with sophisticated communication systems were able to organize more effectively, share resources more efficiently, and develop complex social hierarchies. Language facilitated cooperation, reducing conflict and promoting collective success. It wasn't just about talking, it was about building shared realities. Researchers are now exploring the potential links between language and the development of abstract thought. The ability to represent concepts that don't have a direct physical referent, such as justice, beauty, or love, is heavily reliant on linguistic ability. Language allows us to engage in hypothetical reasoning, to consider, what-if scenarios, and to explore possibilities beyond the immediate sensory world. The fingerprints of this linguistic revolution are etched into the archaeological record, in the increasingly complex tools, the elaborate artwork, and the carefully constructed social structures of our ancestors. It represents a transition not just from instinct to intention, but from simple survival to the capacity for creating a shared, meaningful world. And as our understanding of the fossil record and the mechanics of the brain continue to evolve, we'll undoubtedly uncover even more layers of this remarkable story, revealing the incredible journey by which our ancestors transformed themselves from creatures driven by instinct into the thinking, speaking, and storytelling beings that we are today. The development of complex language was, in essence, the birth of human culture, and its ongoing influence shapes every aspect of our lives. The world as we perceive it, the sunlit forests, the vast oceans, the towering mountains, it's a grand stage, and Homo sapiens has undeniably been a prominent actor. But beneath the surface of every skin cell, within every drop of blood, and clinging to every surface we encounter, exists a far more intricate and frankly astonishing world, the microbiome. It's a universe teeming with life, one we've only begun to truly understand, and it's inextricably linked to our own existence. This world isn't populated by giants, but by incredibly small organisms, bacteria, fungi, archaea, and viruses, collectively outnumbering our own human cells by a significant margin. Their sheer numbers are staggering. Scientists estimate that a single human being hosts approximately 39 trillion microbes. These microorganisms aren't just passively residing within us. They are actively involved in a dizzying array of processes critical to our health and well-being. Let's start with the gut. The digestive tract is home to the largest and most diverse community of microbes. Initially, we were born with a remarkably clean microbiome, almost entirely devoid of these tiny companions. However, from the moment we're exposed to the outside world, through our mothers, our food, and our environment, our gut begins to populate with microbes, a process known as colonization. These microbes play a crucial role in breaking down complex carbohydrates that our own bodies simply can't digest, extracting energy and nutrients that we can then utilize. They also synthesize essential vitamins like K and B vitamins, which are vital for numerous bodily functions. But the influence of the microbiome extends far beyond the digestive system. Emerging research reveals a profound connection between the microbes in our gut and our brain, often referred to as the gut-brain axis. This intricate communication network relies on a complex interplay of chemical signals, including neurotransmitters like serotonin, often called the happiness hormone, and dopamine. The microbes themselves can directly influence the production of these chemicals, impacting mood, behavior, and cognitive function. Furthermore, the microbiome shapes the development and maturation of the nervous system. Studies in germ-free animals, animals raised in sterile environments without any microbes, have revealed significant differences in brain structure and function compared to their counterparts raised in a natural microbial environment. Beyond the gut, we find microbial communities flourishing on every surface of our bodies. The skin, for example, is home to a diverse array of bacteria that contribute to its barrier function, preventing harmful pathogens from entering our system. These skin microbes also play a role in immune system development, training our immune cells to recognize and respond to threats. The scalp, nasal passages, and even the lungs harbor unique microbial communities that influence local health conditions. For instance, imbalances in the microbial communities of the nose have been linked to conditions like sinusitis and allergies. The fungal component of the microbiome is equally important. Yeasts, particularly Candida, are commonly found on human skin and in mucosal surfaces. While many species of Candida are harmless, an overgrowth can lead to conditions like candidiasis, a fungal infection that can manifest in various ways. The balance between bacterial and fungal populations is a delicate one, and disruptions can trigger disease. Interestingly, the composition of our microbiome isn't static. It's constantly shifting, influenced by factors such as diet, lifestyle, stress, and exposure to antibiotics. A diet rich in fiber promotes the growth of beneficial bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, which nourish the cells lining the colon and have anti-inflammatory effects. Conversely, a diet high in processed foods and sugar can disrupt the microbiome, favoring the growth of less desirable microbes. Antibiotics, while essential for treating bacterial infections, can have a devastating effect on the microbiome, indiscriminately wiping out both harmful and beneficial bacteria. This disruption can lead to a condition known as dysbiosis, an imbalance in the microbial community, which can weaken the immune system, increase susceptibility to infections, and contribute to the development of chronic diseases. Researchers are actively exploring strategies to restore the microbiome after antibiotic treatment, including fecal microbiota transplantation, transferring stool from a healthy donor to restore microbial diversity. The study of the microbiome is a rapidly evolving field, and we're only beginning to scratch the surface of its potential. It's becoming increasingly clear that the microbiome isn't simply a passive inhabitant of our bodies. It's an active partner in shaping our health, our behavior, and even our evolution. As we delve deeper into this hidden world, we're uncovering remarkable connections that promise to revolutionize our understanding of human health and disease, potentially leading to new diagnostic tools and therapeutic strategies. The future of medicine may very well hinge on our ability to harness the power of the microbiome. The Earth's early history wasn't a simple tale of individual organisms striving for survival. It was, in fact, a remarkably intricate dance, a constant negotiation and collaboration between entities that gradually built the foundations of almost every complex life form we see today. This wasn't driven by competition alone, though that certainly played a role, but by something far more profound: symbiosis, specifically mutualistic relationships. These were partnerships, initially perhaps accidental, where two or more different species benefited from their association. The earliest examples weren't grand affairs involving flowers and bees, but rather delicate arrangements between bacteria and simpler cells. Consider the cyanobacteria, tiny organisms capable of photosynthesis. They could convert sunlight into energy and oxygen. Early eukaryotic cells, the ancestors of plants and animals, lacked this ability. These early eukaryotes, struggling for resources, encountered the cyanobacteria and, through a series of chance encounters, began to host them within their cells. The cyanobacteria provided the cell with a steady supply of sugars, while the cell offered the bacteria a protected environment and access to resources like carbon dioxide. This wasn't a planned agreement. It was an emergent property of their shared environment, a mutually advantageous arrangement that laid the groundwork for the evolution of chloroplasts, the organelles within plant cells where photosynthesis still takes place today. The story continues with more complex interactions. As cells evolved and diversified, the opportunities for symbiotic partnerships exploded. Some bacteria formed nitrogen-fixing relationships with plant roots. Nitrogen, a crucial element for building proteins and DNA, is abundant in the atmosphere, but plants can't directly utilize it. These bacteria, residing within specialized root structures called nodules, converted atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia, a form that plants could absorb. In return, the plants provided the bacteria with sugars and a safe haven. This single partnership fundamentally altered the Earth's biogeochemical cycles, allowing nitrogen-based life to flourish on a scale previously unimaginable. Moving into the marine environment, the relationship between coral and zooxanthella provides another astonishing example. Coral reefs, those vibrant underwater cities, are built by colonies of tiny animals called polyps. However, the polyps themselves are remarkably pale, lacking the brilliant colors we associate with reefs. The vibrant hues come from microscopic algae, called zooxanthellae, that live within the coral tissues. The zooxanthellae perform photosynthesis, creating sugars and oxygen. The coral, in turn, provides the algae with a protected environment and access to sunlight. When conditions become stressful, often due to rising water temperatures, the coral expels the algae, leading to coral bleaching, a stark visual reminder of this delicate balance. The evolution of lichen offers a particularly compelling narrative. Lichens are composite organisms, appearing as a single, often beautiful structure, but they're actually a partnership between a fungus and an alga or cyanobacterium. The fungus provides the structural support and protection, while the algae or cyanobacterium conducts photosynthesis, providing nourishment to the fungus. Remarkably, the evolutionary history of lichen suggests that the fungus initially evolved to harbor the algae, but over millions of years, the symbiosis became so intertwined that the two organisms are now inextricably linked, blurring the lines between what we traditionally consider species. Consider the evolution of the oxbow lakes in the Midwestern United States. Certain species of bacteria and fungi live within the roots of prairie grasses, forming a symbiotic relationship. These microbes aid the grasses in accessing nutrients from the soil, and in return, the grasses provide a stable habitat and a constant source of sugars. This intricate interaction contributes significantly to the overall health and productivity of the prairie ecosystem. The story doesn't end with simple partnerships. It continues with the remarkable cooperation between termites and their gut bacteria. Termites rely entirely on these bacteria to break down cellulose, the tough material that makes up plant cell walls. The bacteria possess the enzymes necessary to digest cellulose, and the termites provide the bacteria with a warm, moist environment and a constant supply of wood. This symbiosis is so critical that a termite is essentially unable to survive without its bacterial companions. Looking at the animal kingdom, the relationship between cleaner fish and larger fish demonstrates another facet of mutualistic symbiosis. Cleaner fish meticulously remove parasites and dead skin from the bodies of larger fish, providing a valuable service to their hosts. In return, the larger fish provide the cleaner fish with a readily available food source. This interaction highlights the evolutionary advantages of specializing in specific tasks within a complex ecological network. The evolution of mutualistic relationships has profoundly shaped the diversity and complexity of life on Earth. These partnerships aren't merely coincidental. They represent a fundamental strategy for overcoming ecological challenges and exploiting new resources. The interconnectedness of life, driven by these constant negotiations and collaborations, represents a surprisingly elegant and resilient system. As life continued to diversify and adapt, the principle of mutualism became a cornerstone of evolutionary innovation, a testament to the power of cooperation in shaping the natural world. It's a story about how, sometimes, the greatest strength comes not from individual power, but from the bonds we forge with others. The Earth, over billions of years, hasn't just changed slowly, it's been actively rewritten. And hidden within the very rocks themselves, locked in amber-like resins and preserved in the fine dust of ancient landscapes, lies a remarkable record, a story told not in stone alone, but in the tiny, intricate remains of pollen grains. These aren't the fluffy yellow bits you might find clinging to a summer picnic blanket. These are the fossilized reproductive spores of plants, each one a miniature window into the ecosystems that flourished long before humans walked the planet. Paleoclimatologists, the scientists who study these ancient pollen grains, have become adept at deciphering this silent language, building incredibly detailed pictures of past environments. The process begins with excavation. Geologists carefully unearth sedimentary rocks, layers of sediment built up over millennia from the remains of ancient plants, animals, and even microorganisms. These rocks, often found in coastal areas, lake beds, and river deltas, are like layered cookbooks, each layer representing a different time period. The key is that as plants grew, they released pollen into the air, and that pollen, combined with other organic material, gets trapped within the accumulating sediment. The type of sediment, whether it's clay, sand, or even volcanic ash, dramatically affects how well the pollen is preserved. Once extracted, the pollen grains are meticulously prepared. They're often incredibly fragile, so they're treated with acids and solvents to gently remove the surrounding rock material, revealing their beautiful, often remarkably well-preserved, shapes and surfaces. Scientists then use powerful microscopes, far more sophisticated than you might find in a school laboratory, to examine these grains in exquisite detail. The surfaces of pollen grains are covered with intricate patterns, ridges, spines, pores, and these features are species-specific, like a unique fingerprint for each plant. The abundance of different pollen types within a rock layer tells a powerful story about the vegetation that dominated that particular time and place. For example, if a layer contains a large quantity of Araucaria pollen, a now extinct conifer that once covered vast areas of the southern hemisphere, it indicates that a cool, temperate rainforest thrived there. Conversely, a predominance of Pinus pollen, pine, points to a warmer, drier climate with open woodlands. The ratios of different pollen types are incredibly sensitive, allowing scientists to detect subtle changes in plant communities over very short periods, sometimes even decades. The geological record of pollen provides crucial evidence for reconstructing past biomes, large-scale ecosystems characterized by particular plant communities and associated animals. Researchers use this data, combined with other geological information like fossilized leaves and animal bones, to create models of how these biomes evolved and shifted over time. Consider the case of the Cretaceous period, approximately 145 to 66 million years ago. Analysis of pollen from rocks in North America reveals a dominance of ginkgo and taxodium, both ancient conifers, alongside early flowering plants. This suggests a landscape very different from what we see today, one dominated by warm, humid forests. The study of pollen isn't just about identifying ancient plants. It's about understanding the climate that supported them. The distribution of pollen types is closely linked to temperature and rainfall patterns. For example, the presence of eucalyptus pollen in rocks from southern Australia indicates a Mediterranean climate with hot, dry summers and mild, wet winters. A climate that still shapes much of that region today, albeit with significant human influence. Similarly, the migration of pollen grains across continents reveals how climate change, driven by shifting ocean currents and atmospheric circulation patterns, caused plant communities to expand and contract over time. The analysis of fossil pollen also offers a critical perspective on the impact of major geological events. Volcanic eruptions, for instance, can drastically alter landscapes and create ash deposits that preserve pollen grains for millions of years. The types of pollen found within these ash layers can provide information about the intensity of the eruption and the immediate aftermath, allowing scientists to piece together the ecological consequences. Similarly, the deposition of large quantities of marine clay, rich in fossil pollen, during periods of rising sea levels, indicates the inundation of coastal wetlands and the subsequent changes in plant communities. One particularly fascinating area of research focuses on the pollen records of the Eocene, a period roughly 56 to 34 million years ago. At this time, the Earth was significantly warmer than it is today, and the fossil pollen record shows a remarkable diversity of flowering plants, many of which are now found in tropical regions. The presence of magnolia and rosa pollen in rocks from North America suggests that these plants were once widespread in cooler climates, indicating a dramatic shift in global climate patterns. These records are crucial for understanding the long-term effects of greenhouse gas concentrations on the planet. The preservation of pollen in cold environments, like glaciers and permafrost, provides a unique window into past conditions. Ice cores, drilled from glaciers and ice sheets, contain trapped air bubbles that preserve snapshots of atmospheric composition, including pollen. Analyzing the pollen found within these ice cores allows scientists to reconstruct past vegetation cover and understand how climate change has impacted even the most remote regions of the world. Ultimately, the study of fossil pollen is a testament to the power of observation and the ability of scientists to extract meaning from seemingly insignificant fragments of the past. It's a slow, painstaking process, demanding meticulous detail and a deep understanding of geological processes. Yet with each pollen grain examined, scientists are building a richer, more complete picture of the Earth's dynamic history, a history written not in stone alone, but in the silent, exquisite language of plants. It's a story of shifting continents, changing climates, and the remarkable resilience of life itself. The Earth's history is a grand, unfolding story of movement, a constant striving to reach new places, new food sources, and new safety. And at the heart of this movement, driving the evolution of nearly every creature we see today, is the fascinating science of locomotion, how animals move through the world. It's a story deeply rooted in physics, a series of elegant solutions to the fundamental problem of overcoming inertia and navigating obstacles. The simplest forms of animal movement, the slow, deliberate crawls of early invertebrates, offer the first glimpses into this complex interplay of forces. These creatures, often resembling modern slugs or worms, utilized muscular contractions against hydrostatic pressure, the pressure of fluids within their bodies, to propel themselves forward. This basic mechanism, common in many aquatic invertebrates, relies on the principle of Pascal's law. A pressure applied to a fluid is transmitted equally in all directions. By contracting muscles that surround a fluid-filled cavity, these animals created a pushing force, effectively squeezing the fluid and generating movement. As life ventured onto land, the challenges of movement drastically increased. Moving across a surface with friction, the force resisting motion demanded a different approach. The evolution of articulated limbs like those found in arthropods, insects, and crustaceans offered a revolutionary solution. These limbs, constructed of individual segments joined together, allowed for a greater range of motion and facilitated the generation of leverage. The concept of leverage, a cornerstone of simple machines, is crucial here. By applying force at a distance from a pivot point, an animal can amplify its force, allowing it to move heavier objects or overcome greater resistance. Think of using a long lever to lift a rock. You apply a smaller force at one end, but the effect is magnified at the other. The development of jointed appendages in arthropods allowed for complex patterns of muscle contraction and relaxation, generating precise movements for walking, swimming, and even grasping. The vertebrates, starting with fish, took this principle further, refining the arrangement of muscles and bones to create more efficient and powerful movements. The evolution of fins, initially simple flaps for stabilization and maneuvering, eventually became highly specialized structures for propulsion. Fish utilize a fascinating system called undulation, where they ripple their bodies from tail to head, creating a wave-like motion that pushes against the water. This relies on the principle of fluid dynamics, the study of how liquids and gases move. The shape of the fish's body, particularly its streamlined form, minimizes drag, the force opposing motion through a fluid. The more streamlined the shape, the less resistance the water encounters, allowing the fish to move faster and with less energy. The transition to terrestrial locomotion in amphibians and reptiles presented an entirely new set of hurdles. Dry land meant a lack of buoyancy, making the fluid dynamic strategies used by fish ineffective. Instead, these animals developed limbs specifically adapted for support and movement on solid ground. The evolution of the ankle joint was a critical development, allowing the leg to rotate and bear weight effectively. This rotation converts horizontal force into vertical force, enabling animals to push off the ground with their feet. Reptilian locomotion, often described as striding, relies on this principle. They move by alternating limbs, generating a series of powerful pushes and pulls. Then came the birds, a truly remarkable example of evolutionary engineering. Bird flight represents perhaps the most complex form of locomotion on Earth. It's not simply about flapping wings. It's a precisely orchestrated ballet of aerodynamics and muscle power. Birds possess lightweight skeletons, many bones hollow to reduce weight, and powerful flight muscles attached directly to their sternum, their breastbone, allowing them to generate enormous forces. Their wings are not just simple surfaces. They are intricately shaped airfoils, designed to create lift when air flows over them. This lift is generated by the Bernoulli principle. As air flows over a curved surface, it speeds up and reduces its pressure, creating a pressure difference that pushes the wing upwards. Furthermore, birds utilize active control of their flight, meaning they don't just flap their wings in a set pattern. They adjust the angle of attack, the angle at which the wing meets the oncoming air, to control the amount of lift and thrust they generate. They also use their tail feathers as a rudder, providing stability and maneuverability. The physics of bird flight, involving lift, drag, thrust, and weight, is a delicate balance, constantly adjusted and refined through millions of years of evolution. It's a testament to the power of natural selection, shaping a creature perfectly adapted for soaring through the skies. And even as we consider the most advanced forms of locomotion, like the running of mammals, the underlying principles remain the same: applying force to overcome inertia, generating movement, and adapting to the challenges of the environment. Each step, each stride, each wing beat is a beautiful demonstration of the physics that governs the movement of life on Earth, a story written in muscle, bone, and air. The development of complex nervous systems represents a truly remarkable chapter in the story of life. Initially, simpler organisms relied on direct responses to their environment: a touch, a change in light, a chemical signal triggering a rapid, reflexive action. But as life evolved, a more nuanced form of interaction emerged, one that involved internal processing and eventually what we now understand as awareness. The foundations of this shift began with the rise of ganglia, clusters of nerve cells that provided somewhat more organized communication pathways. These were brains in the modern sense, but they facilitated quicker and more integrated responses than purely reflexive actions. Consider the evolution of cephalopods, octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish. Their remarkable intelligence and camouflage abilities aren't simply the result of a single, large brain. Instead, they possess a distributed nervous system. A central brain manages higher-level functions like navigation and hunting. However, each tentacle is controlled by a ring of neurons, allowing for incredibly precise and independent movements. This distributed control, combined with a sophisticated visual system capable of rapid color changes, represents a primitive form of sensory integration, the ability to combine information from different sources to guide behavior. The development of a centralized brain, as we see in vertebrates, marked a profound step. The hindbrain, particularly the medulla oblongata, is remarkably ancient, playing a vital role in regulating basic life functions like breathing and heart rate. However, it's the midbrain and forebrain that hold the key to the more complex aspects of awareness. Within the forebrain, the cerebral cortex has undergone a dramatic expansion over millions of years. The cortical areas are specialized for processing information: auditory, visual, tactile, but their true potential lay in their ability to connect and integrate these signals. The key to understanding consciousness often points to the concept of feed-forward and feedback loops within the brain. Simple reflexes are largely feed-forward. A stimulus triggers a response, but consciousness involves a continuous cycle of sensory input, internal processing, and modified responses. For example, when you reach for a glass of water, you don't just react to the sensation of thirst. You consciously perceive the glass, evaluate its location and potential risk, and then meticulously coordinate your movements. This ongoing loop of sensory input and motor output is fundamental to our experience. A critical component in this process is the thalamus, a structure that acts as a relay station for sensory information before it reaches the cortex. The thalamus doesn't just passively transmit signals. It plays a role in selecting and prioritizing which information is sent to the cortex, effectively shaping our conscious experience. Different thalamic nuclei specialize in processing different types of sensory input, further contributing to the complexity of our perception. The evolution of cortical areas like the prefrontal cortex is particularly relevant. This region, located at the very front of the brain, is associated with higher-order cognitive functions such as planning, decision-making, and working memory. It's believed to be crucial for our sense of self, our ability to reflect on our thoughts and actions, and to anticipate future events. However, the prefrontal cortex didn't suddenly appear fully formed. It evolved gradually, with earlier versions likely involved in simpler forms of decision-making and attention. Neuroscientists are still actively investigating the neural correlates of consciousness, the specific brain activity that is associated with conscious experience. Techniques like fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, allow researchers to observe which areas of the brain are active when a person is consciously aware. Studies have shown that activity in the integrated cortex, a network of interconnected areas, is consistently linked to conscious awareness. It's not a single consciousness center, but rather a distributed network working in concert. Furthermore, the concept of global workspace theory proposes that consciousness arises when information is broadcast across this interconnected network. When information is deemed important, perhaps because it requires a complex response, it is spotlighted and made available to all parts of the cortex. This broadcasting process is thought to be what gives rise to our subjective experience. The study of animal consciousness is equally fascinating. While we may not fully understand the subjective experience of other creatures, research is revealing surprising levels of awareness in species ranging from primates and dolphins to crows and elephants. Each species possesses unique adaptations that have shaped their nervous systems and, consequently, their levels of awareness. It's important to remember that consciousness isn't a binary state, present or absent. It exists on a spectrum, with different organisms exhibiting varying degrees of awareness. The neural architecture required for complex consciousness is undeniably complex, but the underlying principles, distributed processing, interconnected networks, and the ability to integrate information, have been gradually shaped by evolution over billions of years. The ongoing quest to unravel the mysteries of consciousness continues, promising to deepen our understanding of what it means to be a thinking, feeling, and experiencing being in the vast and intricate story of life on Earth. The story of life on Earth, as we've come to understand it, is a remarkable unfolding, a continuous experiment in adaptation and survival. It's a story now reaching a particularly critical chapter, one largely shaped by the actions of a single species, our own. Looking ahead, the planet presents a complex set of challenges, primarily driven by the consequences of human activities, yet also interwoven with a profound and accelerating loss of the very diversity that has defined life's journey so far. The fundamental issue is simple: the delicate balance that has sustained countless ecosystems for billions of years is being disrupted at an unprecedented rate. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. The rise in atmospheric carbon dioxide, a direct result of burning fossil fuels and deforestation, is causing a gradual warming of the Earth's climate. This isn't just about warmer summers, it's a cascade of interconnected changes. The oceans, absorbing a significant portion of this excess carbon, are becoming more acidic, threatening marine life, particularly those creatures with calcium carbonate shells like corals and shellfish. Simultaneously, the increased temperatures are causing glaciers and ice sheets to melt at an alarming pace, contributing to rising sea levels that threaten coastal communities and ecosystems. We see this reflected in the behavior of species: migrations driven by shifting climates, altered breeding patterns, and increased instances of extreme weather events. Beyond climate change, another equally urgent concern is biodiversity loss. The sheer variety of life, the millions of different species of plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms, is being eroded at a rate that rivals past mass extinction events. Habitat destruction, primarily due to agriculture, urbanization, and resource extraction, is the biggest driver. As we convert forests and wetlands into farmland or build cities, we eliminate the homes and resources that countless species rely upon. The fragmentation of these remaining habitats further isolates populations, reducing genetic diversity and making them more vulnerable to disease and environmental changes. It's a profoundly interconnected web. Many species rely on specific pollinators like bees to reproduce, yet bee populations are declining dramatically due to pesticide use, habitat loss, and diseases. The loss of top predators like wolves or large cats can trigger cascading effects throughout the food chain, disrupting entire ecosystems. The intricate relationships between organisms, the symbiotic partnerships, the predator-prey interactions, are not simply random occurrences. They've evolved over millennia to create stable and resilient communities. However, the narrative isn't solely one of bleak predictions. The understanding of these challenges has, in turn, fueled an equally powerful wave of scientific and technological innovation. Researchers are developing strategies to mitigate climate change, ranging from transitioning to renewable energy sources, solar, wind, geothermal, to capturing carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. Geoengineering, though controversial, is being explored as a potential last resort, involving techniques like injecting aerosols into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight. The key, scientists emphasize, is to reduce our carbon emissions drastically and swiftly. Moreover, conservation efforts are gaining momentum. Protected areas, meticulously designed and managed, are providing havens for endangered species. Reforestation initiatives, using native tree species, are restoring degraded landscapes and sequestering carbon. Scientists are also pioneering techniques like assisted evolution, carefully managing populations to enhance their resilience to climate change and disease. A critical element moving forward lies in our approach to agriculture. Industrial farming practices, with their heavy reliance on fertilizers and pesticides, contribute significantly to both climate change and biodiversity loss. There's a growing movement towards regenerative agriculture farming methods that prioritize soil health, reduce chemical inputs, and enhance biodiversity. These systems, mimicking natural ecosystems, can actually draw carbon from the atmosphere and improve water retention, creating a more sustainable and resilient food system. The role of human intervention is undeniably complex. We've fundamentally altered the planet's systems, and that alteration carries responsibility. But the science also demonstrates that we have the knowledge and, increasingly, the tools to address these challenges. The future of life on Earth depends not just on understanding the problems, but on actively choosing a different path. A path guided by scientific evidence, respect for the natural world, and a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all living things. Ultimately, the story continues. It's a story of adaptation, resilience, and the potential for change. It's a story where the choices we make today will profoundly shape the destiny of life on this planet for generations to come. The intricate web of life, damaged though it may be, still possesses a remarkable capacity for healing, but only if we, as the dominant force in its future, embrace our role as careful stewards. The ultimate measure of our success won't be just technological advancement, but our ability to live in harmony with the Earth and all the incredible life it supports. As the light of Earth gently fades, let your thoughts drift with the rhythm of the stars. We've journeyed through the incredible story of life, a testament to resilience and wonder. If you're still awake and enjoyed this exploration, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Ultimate Sleep Doctor. Together, we can soothe more wandering minds, one peaceful night at a time. Allow your mind to soften, your breath to deepen, letting your thoughts flow free and unhurried until sleep finds you.